The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, a turning point in Roman history. In the year 9 CE, one of the most catastrophic defeats in Roman history unfolded deep within the dense, forbidding forests of Germania. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, also known as the Varian Disaster, marked a turning point in the ambitions of the Roman Empire and highlighted the perils of overconfidence in imperial expansion. The battle resulted in the complete annihilation of 3 Roman legions, led by General Publius Quinctilius Varus, at the hands of a coalition of Germanic tribes led by a brilliant and cunning warrior, Arminius. This is the story of how a Roman general, lulled into a false sense of security by an ally turned traitor, marched his soldiers into an ambush that would alter the course of Western history. To understand the significance of the battle, we must first examine Rome's objectives in Germania. By the 1st century CE, Rome was at the height of its power. Under Emperor Augustus, the empire stretched from Spain in the west to Syria in the east, from North Africa to the British Isles. Rome's military machine was unmatched, its legions disciplined and battle-hardened. Augustus envisioned extending Rome's borders further into the lands of Germania, east of the Rhine River, to secure the empire and gain access to valuable resources. Germania, however, was a vast, untamed region inhabited by numerous independent tribes. These tribes were fiercely protective of their autonomy, resistant to foreign rule, and masters of their rugged environment. Still, Augustus believed that Roman organization, engineering, and military power could subdue these barbarians. By 7 CE, General Varus was assigned to govern the newly subdued territories in Germania, tasked with consolidating Roman authority and introducing Roman customs, governance, and taxation. Varus, however, underestimated the people he sought to rule. His heavy-handed approach alienated the Germanic tribes, many of whom resented the imposition of Roman taxes and laws. Meanwhile, Arminius, a chieftain of the Cherusci tribe and a Roman-trained officer, saw an opportunity to unite the Germanic peoples against their common enemy. Arminius, also known as Hermann in German lore, was a man of 2 worlds. Born into a noble Germanic family, he was sent to Rome as a young man, where he received a Roman education and military training. He rose through the ranks of the Roman auxiliary forces and was granted Roman citizenship, a rare honor for a foreigner. His time in the Roman military gave him an intimate understanding of Roman tactics, formations, and strategies, knowledge he would later use to devastating effect. To the Romans, Arminius appeared loyal. To his fellow Germans, however, he became a unifying figure, secretly forging alliances among rival tribes. His charisma, military acumen, and knowledge of Roman methods made him the ideal leader for a rebellion. By the summer of 9 CE, Arminius had crafted an elaborate plan to lure Varus and his legions into a deadly trap. General Varus, unaware of Arminius's duplicity, trusted his subordinate implicitly. In September 9 CE, Arminius informed Varus of a rebellion in a distant part of the territory. Believing that Arminius's local knowledge and military expertise would help him suppress the unrest, Varus led nearly 20,000 men, 3 full legions, 17th, 18th, and 19th, along with auxiliary troops and camp followers, into the heart of Germania. The route chosen was perilous. Instead of open roads or fortified paths, the Romans marched through the Teutoburg forest, a dense and sprawling wilderness. The terrain was treacherous, with narrow trails, towering trees, and thick underbrush that made it nearly impossible to maintain formation. Heavy rains turned the ground to mud, further slowing their progress. The Romans, accustomed to fighting in open fields where their disciplined formations gave them an advantage, were unprepared for such conditions. Arminius, under the pretense of scouting ahead, disappeared into the forest. In reality, he was coordinating with his forces, preparing to spring the trap. As the Roman column stretched out over miles of difficult terrain, the Germanic warriors struck. Armed with spears, swords, and bows, they attacked with ferocity, emerging from the trees to hurl projectiles at the Roman ranks before vanishing back into the forest. These hit-and-run tactics, combined with the Romans' inability to counterattack effectively in the confined space, created chaos. The Romans attempted to regroup, but the terrain worked against them. Their wagons, carrying supplies and weapons, became bogged down in the mud. Communication between units broke down, and panic spread as the Germans attacked again and again, targeting the most vulnerable parts of the column. The dense forest amplified the psychological impact of the ambush. The Romans could not see their attackers, nor could they predict where the next assault would come from. The incessant rain and the cries of the wounded added to the sense of doom. Over the course of 3 days, the Germans harried the Roman forces relentlessly. At night, the Romans tried to fortify their positions, but they lacked adequate supplies and shelter. Hunger, exhaustion, and fear took their toll. Every attempt to break out of the forest was met with fierce resistance from the Germans, who used their intimate knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the Romans at every turn. By the 3rd day, it was clear that the legions were doomed. Arminius's forces had surrounded the Romans, cutting off any chance of escape. General Varus, realizing the battle was lost, took his own life rather than face the humiliation of capture. His officers followed suit, leaving the surviving soldiers leaderless and demoralized. The remnants of the Roman forces were hunted down and slaughtered. Almost no one escaped. The 16th, the 8th, and 19th legions were wiped out entirely, a loss so devastating that their numbers were never used again in the Roman army. When news of the disaster reached Rome, the empire was shaken to its core. Emperor Augustus, now an elderly man, was reportedly inconsolable. According to the historian Suetonius, Augustus would wander the halls of his palace crying out, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." The psychological impact of the defeat was profound. For the first time in decades, the invincible image of the Roman legions had been shattered. The empire abandoned its plans to expand beyond the Rhine River, which became the de facto northern boundary of Roman territory. Although subsequent campaigns, led by generals like Germanicus, sought to avenge the defeat and recover the lost eagles of the legions, Rome never again attempted to conquer Germania. For the Germanic tribes, the victory was a unifying moment and a symbol of resistance against imperial domination. Arminius became a legend, celebrated as the liberator of Germania. However, his later years were marked by internal strife among the tribes, and he was eventually assassinated by his own people. Even so, his legacy endured as a hero who stood against Rome. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest was a turning point in Roman history. It demonstrated the limits of Rome's power and the dangers of over-reliance on local allies without fully understanding their loyalties. The battle also underscored the importance of terrain and strategy. Arminius's ability to exploit the forest and use guerrilla tactics neutralized Rome's traditional strengths, proving that even the most disciplined army could be vulnerable in the wrong circumstances. For Rome, the disaster led to a strategic shift. The empire focused on fortifying its existing borders rather than pursuing aggressive expansion. This defensive approach, known as limes, would define Roman policy in the north for centuries. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest remains one of the most infamous defeats in Roman history. It serves as a reminder of the complexities of conquest and the resilience of those who refuse to submit to foreign rule. To this day, it is remembered as a moment when the mightiest empire of the ancient world faced its greatest humiliation.